If your nervous system is spinning and you're reaching for certainty, you're not in alignment. You're in ego reaction. Most of us aren't actually making choices. We're reacting from programming, fear, urgency, and guilt. And the deeper truth, your soul has never rushed a decision. Your ego, on the other hand, can't sit still. So today we're naming the difference. And I'm going to walk you back into your own clarity, your own breath, and your own alignment. If this is your first time here with us, welcome. My name is Elgin, contrarian soul guide, visionary mystic, and creatrix of practical spiritualism. And I'm so glad you're here. So let's talk ego reaction versus aligned action. And let's really define this plainly. So ego reaction is fast, impulsive, and noisy. There's a lot of thought, a lot of chatter. And it feels like I should, or I have to, or what will they think? It tends to be emotionally fueled by guilt, urgency, anger, shame, and really fear. Whereas aligned action is more grounded. It tends to be spacious, and we feel a little more rooted, a little more stable in our body. It feels like I may be scared, but this feels true. And have you ever noticed that excitement and anxiety, they actually feel similar? The difference? The thoughts that you're having. So once we open to our truth, anxiety softens into more of a nervous excitement and wonder. There's clarity even if there's discomfort. So if it feels frantic, forced, or fueled by needing to prove, you're an ego. If it feels like a quiet exhale, you're in truth. So the ego speaks first, and the soul, it waits for silence. This is why we practice the sacred pause, to create that space, to hear the truth within ourselves. So let's talk about the programming that's beneath the reaction, because you weren't born reactive. You were taught to override stillness. It can come from childhood conditioning, performing to be loved. It can come from hustle culture, the need to act fast or be left behind. Our nervous system trauma, and often we react just to feel safe. And reacting gives you really a false sense of control, but it's just avoidance in disguise. And sometimes it's not confusion, it's the pain of holding presence without an answer. So I want to talk about this. How do we get these reactions, these ego reactions in real life? Well, first of all, reactions are actually linked to emotional triggers. And that's what I mean when I say conditioning. And conditioning is not just a place where we place blame on other people. We're talking about our wounds, our dramas, and our traumas. And our traumas aren't always traumas with a capital T. Traumas can be traumas with a small t. They can be everyday heart wounds, those heartaches of feeling rejected. And no, they're not these great big huge traumas. They're not being abused or anything like that, but they're still traumatic. We still feel like we are losing something and we're being kind of voted off the island. And that will have a long-term effect on us if we don't move through. And all of those experiences create what Eckhart Tolle calls the pain body. And I love the language of this, because it gives us an understanding, like, here's my physical body, but then there's my subtle body, my emotional body. And my emotional body holds my memories. And so within that, we would say, if we were talking in yogic, we would be calling it our samskaras. And so all of these create our pain body. And so we want to be able to release and let go of the pain body. But first, let's talk about how it gets built up. So if we have an experience, whatever that is, and then we have an emotion that goes with it. And so something that my mom does or says, I feel hurt and resentment. And now I'm going to have a trigger or a reaction. And as opposed to an experience without an emotion, here's just this experience. I'm unattached to it. It happened. It's about her. It's not about me. And instead, I'm just going to respond. So you can think of our triggers create our reactions, which is quick action. And so quick to the trigger. Whereas an experience without an emotion gives us a response, and a response is responsible. And a response always has a pause before it. So there's this moment where there's not a need to jump because we're good. So it's important that we understand our experiences are going to happen. Those are part of life. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And suffering is created by our thoughts. Our thoughts that those experiences should have been different, that they weren't fair. That is what causes our suffering. And so those thoughts create emotions such as resentment, hurt, fear, anger, irritation. I could go on. So, those emotions aren't necessary for us. And what happens is the ego says, I need to hold on to these emotions so that they can protect me. And I remember this wound so I don't let it happen again. And we create this emotional armor and we hold on to it, which creates the pain body, the suffering. The thing is you don't actually need to keep any of that to learn from your experience. So the experience plus the emotions, the hurts and the wounds create our triggers, our trauma, our suffering. Whereas if we have the experience without the motion, then we create wisdom. And what I mean by that is if you were to get food poisoning, you go to a restaurant, you have food poisoning, you don't say, oh, I need to keep this food with me for the rest of my life so I never forget what food poisoning's like. You remember, to check your chicken to make sure it's cooked. You have those skills now embedded in you. You don't require the food to remember that. Just like you don't need to keep and hold on to the hurt or the fear or the resentment to learn and absorb the lessons and keep the wisdom while expelling the trigger. Does that make sense? So the way that I always picture this is our wounds or our triggers, our traumas are like light fixtures. And the light fixture's just there. There's the wound. It can sit there unnoticed for years and years and years under the surface until somebody walks into the room and hits the light switch. And your light switch is the trigger. It triggers, we hit it, and it triggers the light to turn on, the wound to be activated. And so what happens for a lot of people is they say, I have this wound and I don't want anybody to touch it. So they put a sticky note on that light switch and it says, don't touch. And then somebody comes along and they're not paying attention and they hit the switch. Person pops off the handle and they're like, didn't you see the sign? How could you be so ignorant? I'm offended. So then we go, well, it was just a sticky note. Maybe it fell off. I don't know. I didn't read it. Maybe it's not my language. And so then they go, okay, well, fine. I don't want this to happen again. I'm going to put tape on it this time. So it's harder for people to get to it. I'm protecting myself. Armor number 2. And again, somebody comes by, they have no idea why that's on. They hit the switch to see what it does. Boom, off we go again. And so now they go, all right, I'm going to get an electrical box and I'm going to put an electrical box around that so that people don't just bump into the switch. And on it goes. Maybe then you make it a lockbox. The problem is the wound is still there and at some point it's going to get hit again. And you're spending your entire life trying to stop people from hitting the light instead of just removing and deactivating the light. So what we want to do is, first step would be to deactivate the light. So do the excavation work. Start the work to release and let them go. You're not broken. The problem is we have a whole bunch of these wounds in our body and we're trying to stop people from bumping into them. And we think when somebody bumps into us, it means that we're broken. No, it doesn't. It means we got a bruise. And we need to heal it. We need to move the energy through that and let that go. We don't need to keep that bruise so we never forget to not walk into a door again. And that's what we're talking about here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to really remove the light and remove the switch. That way, even if the switch is on, if the light's not there, nothing's happening. But at the end of the day, the best thing that we can do is remove the light, pull the wiring, drywall patch over top of it, take the switch off the wall, drywall patch over that, and you're back to new. And you never have to worry or think about that ever again. And that's what we need to do for each other. Rather than getting offended, rather than expecting people to change their behaviors to not hurt our wounds, it's important that we understand our wounds are ours and we're responsible for their healing, not other people. We are. And this is super important. Our healing journey, the time of that, is not dependent on other people's healing journeys and their behaviors. Sorry, it's just not. You are your only project. I am my only project. They are their only project. Let them behave the way that they are. Let them have their healing journey or not. Maybe let them stay ignorant. It's irrelevant because that's their journey. Let you make the decision to let these things go, to no longer give the ego something to react to no longer identify, because that's what ego is. It's the identification with form. So rather than identifying as my wounds, as my past experiences, as this body, as my memories, identifying as a survivor, as a victim, instead I let all of those things go so that I can start to release and come back to my truth, which is simply I am. And that is what happens for us when we start releasing these and we start moving back towards alignment. So ego reactions are always linked to emotional triggers. They're always linked to wounds, whether those wounds are real or not. Remember that a lot of our wounds are about our perceptions. They're not about actual events. They're about how we perceived those events or how we even remember those events. And our memories are not as accurate as we think they are. I think the last numbers that came in on an experience was less than 50% of our memories are actually true. So that means that we need to take a peek at these things when they come up and go, is that actually true? And who am I when I have this trigger? Who would I be if I didn't react like this? What would my life look like then? And allow yourself a little bit of time and space to pause and start to ponder that. Who would I be if I didn't allow my ego to react like this? Who would I be if I didn't identify as this wound or believe that this wound was somehow protecting me? Then who could I be? Then how would I show up in this world? What differences would I make? And just let that sink in. What kind of a ripple effect would you leave at that point? So, what does that feel like in our bodies? What does aligned action really feel like? Well, alignment isn't actually always ease or peace or calm. Sometimes it's the scariest choice in the room because it's real. So, signs of aligned action would be a feeling in your chest that feels open, even if your voice shakes. The action feels clean, even if it disrupts somebody else. And that's okay. Let them feel distress. Let you stay centered. You don't need to over-explain. You don't need to justify yourself. When you're in alignment, you don't need to convince anybody. You simply are. So some Eckhart Tolle influence. Ego action is past and future obsessed, where aligned action exists only in the now. So how do we practice the pause? This is really where the shift happens. To pause, to breathe, and then ask, is this fear or is this truth? And for your journal prompt on this, what am I afraid will happen if I don't act now? So, an embodiment tool to really take your hand on your heart and your hand on your gut and say, body, what do we already know? Ask yourself that. What do we already know? This is the practice of sovereignty, not loud, but radical. Every single pause is a power move. Taking a breath before anything. And I invite you to grab your authentic self blueprint where you can discover where you're out of alignment and how to get back on track. The goal of it is to help people self-assess where they're out of alignment and where shifts are needed. And I've left the link for this, and it's free in the show description. So let's talk about leading from alignment in real life, because we don't just lead in big moments. We lead in how we answer texts, how we show up for ourselves at 5 a.m., 6 a.m., 8 a.m., in how we say no without guilt or distress. Real sovereignty equals radical self-responsibility for your nervous system and for your choices. You don't have to be pulled and pushed by fear. You don't owe the world urgency. You owe your soul truth. And leadership starts with a pause, a breath, and a choice that really honors who you're becoming. So drop an I choose alignment in the comments and let's start having some conversation about this. I invite you to join our Awakening Circle, a private Facebook group that is all about soul-fed conversations. And our Sovereignty Rising podcast is here to support you. And we have just dropped episode 12, and the link is in the description as well. Please subscribe and like and share. Let's get the word out. And subscribe for your weekly teachings that really help you ground into your power and into the present. The most rebellious thing you can do is choose presence. That's where alignment lives. That's where your life starts moving differently. If this resonated, stirred something in you, or helped you even take one conscious breath, hit that like button and subscribe for more soul-rooted truth, nervous system healing, and sovereignty-led living. And share this with a sister who's still choosing from fear instead of alignment. This is how we really rise together, one breath, one choice at a time. I see the light in you, and it is absolutely freaking brilliant. I want you to see it too. Until next time, stay sovereign.